Maid immediately. The words hissed from the corner of
Thank
Gerald
you for
Whitmore's
having me.
mouth into his lapel mic, as if they might dissolve if spoken any
We're so
louder.
glad to have you.
His gaze flicked nervously
Perfect.
toward the glass
Thank you for
entrance of the
having me.
Wellington Palace Hotel, where, beyond the polished doors, the convoy of black SUVs had begun to glide into the driveway. He tugged at his tie, already perfect, and drew a deep breath that still failed to steady him. The lobby gleamed with oppressive grandeur. Crystal chandeliers rained fractured light over marble floors so clean they reflected the anxious faces of the staff waiting in line. Every detail was meant to impress. The fresh orchids imported from Thailand, the faint scent of jasmine threaded through the air ducts, the banner overhead trimmed exactly at regulation height. It was the kind of stage Gerald had spent 20 years perfecting. But one wrong note, a glimpse of a housekeeper where she wasn't supposed to be, a mistranslated word, and the whole performance could collapse. He pasted on his best smile just as the lead vehicle stopped outside. The doorman snapped to attention, security men scanned the perimeter, and then Victor Zhang emerged. The Chinese billionaire moved with a calm authority that made lesser men stiffen their shoulders. His suit, charcoal cut with surgical precision, suggested power without ostentation. 6 associates flanked him, each carrying a leather portfolio. They followed him like a tide that reshaped every space it entered. "Welcome to the Wellington, Mr. Zhang," Gerald said, extending a hand that trembled just enough to betray his nerves. Zhang's eyes barely touched him before he began speaking in rapid Mandarin to his team. The words were fluid, crisp, a language Gerald had assured everyone would not be necessary today. He reached for his smartphone, thumbs fumbling over the translation app. A robotic voice crackled, "Chicken tax hotel mooncake." The sound echoed against the marble. One of Zhang's associates coughed into his fist to hide a laugh. Zhang himself stiffened, his expression hardening like cooling steel. "I am terribly sorry," Gerald said quickly. "Unfortunately, none of our staff speak Mandarin fluently." The silence that followed was louder than the chandeliers above. Somewhere behind them, a cleaning cart squeaked faintly against the marble. The woman pushing it kept her eyes low, her uniform pressed into dull gray anonymity. Her name was Naomi Carter. To Gerald, she was invisible. To most guests, she was air. Yet as her cart passed through the periphery of Zhang's gaze, her mind automatically translated every clipped Mandarin phrase with the ease of someone who had lived in Beijing half a decade. She heard the billionaire's comment, "The decor is acceptable, but I doubt they understand our needs." Naomi did not flinch. She pushed the cart toward the service corridor, her face a mask of practiced neutrality. But inside, something twisted a familiar sting. No one here knew the diplomas hidden in her closet, one embossed with Harvard crimson, another with Beijing University's seal. No one knew she'd written a thesis on cross-cultural hospitality markets. All they saw was the gray uniform and the cart full of bleach, and Gerald had just tried to erase even that. 3 hours earlier, the hotel had been a hive of rehearsed chaos. Gerald paced the employee break room, his voice a whip. 2 p.m. sharp. Mr. Zhang's motorcade arrives. His group controls 30 luxury properties worldwide. He's considering the Wellington. One mistake, and we're finished. Department heads fired updates like soldiers reporting to command. The chef described the 12-course tasting menu tailored to Chinese cuisine. The concierge confirmed exclusive access to the city's most guarded attractions. The maintenance supervisor swore the presidential suite's thermostat was locked at 72 degrees, exactly as Zhang's assistant demanded. A timid front desk manager raised her hand. "Sir, I heard Mr. Zhang prefers Mandarin in business. Should we arrange?" "No," Gerald cut her off with a sharp wave. "His assistant promised me he speaks English. Besides, our translation apps are state-of-the-art. Practically human." He tapped his phone for emphasis, as if its black screen could silence doubt. Then his gaze landed on Emma, head of housekeeping. "Keep your people invisible today. Rooms spotless, but no one should see them working." Emma nodded. Orders trickled down the chain. Naomi Carter, 31, heard the words without surprise. Invisible, always invisible. On the East Wing's top floor, Naomi slipped fresh sheets over the king mattress with measured precision. Her motions were efficient, almost ceremonial. Fold, tuck, smooth. The faint smell of Egyptian cotton and disinfectant filled the air. She adjusted the aromatherapy diffuser to the corner of the suite, murmuring to herself in perfect Mandarin about airflow and sunlight. From her bag peeked the dog-eared spine of an economics journal in Chinese, its margins filled with her neat notes. A buzz on her phone announced another past-due reminder from her loan provider. She tucked it away, pressing her lips together. She had returned from Beijing brimming with ambition, certain her language skills and research would open international doors. Instead, 300 rejection letters had piled up. A friend suggested applying at the Wellington just until something better. That was 4 years ago. In that time, she had polished brass while listening to executives fumble through negotiations, silently correcting mistranslations while emptying bins. She had watched millions change hands while earning tips left on nightstands. The irony carved at her daily, in a world desperate for cultural bridges. She was paid to scrub the footprints from marble. The walkie-talkie on her hip crackled. VIP arrival in 50 minutes. Housekeeping. Retreat to service areas. Copy, Naomi said softly. She straightened the pillows once more, then wheeled her cart toward the service elevator. Downstairs, Gerald adjusted a crooked frame in the lobby with trembling fingers. To him, the hotel was a stage, and today his greatest performance. Everything gleamed. Orchids aligned with laser precision. Ambient music lowered to a scientifically measured volume. He believed if every detail shimmered, so would his future. 20 years of clawing upward, from front desk clerk to assistant to manager. Now general manager balanced on this moment. A successful deal with Zhang meant corporate office, prestige, a salary that would silence every whisper of failure. The birthdays he had missed, the marriage that had fractured, the friends who had drifted away sacrifices would finally prove worthwhile. He checked his watch. 1:59 p.m. Outside, engines idled. The lobby held its breath. The black Mercedes SUVs glided to a stop in the driveway, like a fleet of silent predators. Security men spilled out first, scanning with sharp eyes. The doorman tugged his jacket straight and swung open the brass doors. Victor Zhang stepped down from the second vehicle, his shoes glinting under the autumn light. Though in his 60s, he carried himself with the ease of command. His crimson tie flashed against the subdued suit like a slash of power. 6 associates followed, their portfolios identical, their faces expressionless. Gerald advanced, smile locked in place, hand extended. Welcome to the Wellington Palace Hotel. Mr. Zhang, we are honored by your presence. Zhang gave a curt nod and turned immediately to his team, speaking Mandarin too quickly for Gerald to follow. The language filled the vaulted ceiling, elegant and unyielding. Gerald tried to laugh lightly. He tapped his phone, opened the translation app, and held it forward. Zhang spoke. The app processed, and then, metallic and absurd, chicken tax and hotel mooncake. A strangled chuckle escaped one associate. Zhang's eyes narrowed. Panic flooded Gerald's chest. He tried again, speaking slower. The app spat back. Foreign money tree law, change question, important now. The absurdity hung heavy. Zhang's expression iced over. I am terribly sorry, Gerald said, voice cracking under the weight of his collapsing dream. It seems we are experiencing some technical issues. Behind him, Naomi Carter paused with her cart just long enough to hear Zhang's real words. A sharp question about foreign investment tax structures and municipal zoning regulations, precisely the topic she had studied years ago. She felt a familiar tug, the ache of wasted ability. She turned away before anyone could see the flicker in her eyes. Gerald straightened his tie again, though it didn't need straightening. Every polished surface around him now reflected not perfection, but fragility. His 20 years of ambition balanced on the edge of mistranslated nonsense. And Naomi, unseen in the corner, already knew this performance was about to collapse. The Wellington's grand lobby still echoed with the awkward silence left by the mangled translation. Gerald's forced smile clung to his face like drying plaster, stiff and brittle. He gestured toward the elevators, ushering Victor Zhang and his entourage forward, praying momentum would disguise the cracks already showing. "This way, Mr. Zhang. We've prepared the presidential suite exactly to your preferences," Gerald said, his tone overbright, every syllable a desperate attempt at control. Zhang's curt nod gave nothing away. He murmured something in Mandarin to his associate, who scribbled a note in the portfolio. Gerald didn't need a translation to know the words were critical, perhaps damning. His heart pounded. Staff appeared like clockwork 2 bellhops, a concierge, even a chef in spotless whites holding a tray of appetizers meant to echo Zhang's homeland. They bowed slightly as the entourage passed. From the corner, Naomi Carter watched with the detachment of someone used to being scenery. She pushed her cart closer to the service corridor, but her ears remained sharp. She understood every Mandarin phrase, each casual remark Zhang made about the architecture, about whether the hotel's design reflected any understanding of Chinese cultural preferences. Her fingers tightened on the cart handle. The answer was obvious. It didn't. And no one here had the tools to respond. The tour swept through the hotel like a tide. Gerald pointed out the spa, the Michelin-starred restaurant, the ballroom with ceilings high enough to host an opera. He rattled statistics and accolades, barely listening to himself. Zhang responded only in Mandarin, his tone cool, precise, his eyes taking in every detail. At each stop, Miss Lin, his assistant, translated snippets into English, always pared down, always softened. "Mr. Zhang appreciates the architecture. Mr. Zhang thinks the dining space is elegant." But Naomi, shadowing unseen along the back halls, caught the truth. The spa design is shallow Western imitation of Asian aesthetics. The menu lacks balance. The ballroom lacks feng shui alignment. Every phrase, every critique landed sharper in Mandarin than the polite translations Ms. Lin offered. Gerald heard only the edited versions. He smiled wider, mistaking courtesy for approval. By the time the group entered the executive conference room, tension hummed like static. The table gleamed with bottled water lined at perfect angles. Leather-bound portfolios waited at each seat. Gerald inhaled deeply, preparing to begin the presentation that had consumed his every waking moment for months. "Gentlemen," he began, "today we will outline the Wellington's unique investment potential." Zhang cut across him with a swift question in Mandarin. His voice was low but insistent. Naomi, pausing in the hall with her cart, caught the words clearly. "What are the current foreign investment tax structures in this region, and how do they compare with Shanghai's regulations?" Inside, Miss Lin hesitated before translating. "Mr. Zhang would like to understand your perspective on regional business climate." The dilution made Naomi wince. Outside the door, she hovered, cloth in hand, dusting the same patch of molding for the third time. She felt every beat of Gerald's silence as he struggled to answer a question he hadn't anticipated. "Well," Gerald began, throat tightening, "that's an excellent question. Perhaps our legal team could prepare a detailed response later." Another question in Mandarin followed immediately, sharper this time. "Something about municipal zoning allowances for integrated hospitality retail developments?" Naomi's pulse quickened. She had written her thesis on zoning codes in Beijing. She knew the context. She could have answered in an instant. Ms. Lin's translation was hesitant. "Mr. Zhang is curious about development flexibility." Again, the edges dulled, the challenge disguised. The app on Gerald's phone became his lifeline. He raised it with trembling fingers. "Let me make sure I understand." He spoke into the microphone, handed it to Zhang. The billionaire answered, clipped. The app blinked, then emitted, chicken tax and moon hotel cake. The absurdity sucked the air from the room. An associate's mouth twitched toward a laugh. Zhang's eyes grew dark, dangerous. Gerald flushed scarlet. He tried again. The device returned another nonsensical string. Sweat pooled at his collar. His dream of promotion, the years of sacrifice, he felt them sliding out of reach. Perhaps we should take a short recess, he blurted. 5 minutes, while I gather our specialists. Zhang checked his platinum watch, then gave a stiff nod. 5 minutes, that was all. In the hallway, Gerald nearly collapsed against the wall. His executives clustered around him like anxious schoolchildren. Options, he demanded. Now! The finance controller panted from climbing 3 flights of stairs. I can speak on local tax issues, but international? Beyond me. The assistant spoke quickly. Our language service says their Mandarin translator is sick. Earliest they can find a replacement is 30 minutes. We don't have 30 minutes. Gerald snapped, voice cracking. The food and beverage director suggested visual aids. The IT manager explained the app's limitations. The head of security muttered about a cousin who once took Mandarin in college. Each idea collapsed under the weight of impossibility. Naomi stood only a few feet away, rag in hand, dusting the molding. No one saw her. She might as well have been part of the wallpaper. But she heard everything. Gerald's desperation, the futile suggestions, the mounting panic. Through the crack of the conference room door, she glimpsed Zhang checking his watch again, murmuring to his team. She caught the toned disdain mixed with disappointment. She understood. This wasn't just about language. It was a test. Zhang was measuring whether the Wellington could handle global sophistication. Naomi's hand stilled on the wall. Inside her chest, the same ache rose again. Years of invisibility. Years of swallowing her abilities because offering them unasked only brought reprimands. Stay in your lane, one manager had once told her after she helped Japanese tourists. Guests get uncomfortable when service staff act too educated. That scar still burned. And yet, wasn't this the moment? If she stayed silent, Gerald's career would collapse. Yes, but so would her own chance. An investment here could mean expansion, new roles, new international connections, a door finally opening. Her pulse thundered. She slid off her cleaning gloves, tucking them into her apron, straightened her posture, smoothed the stray strand of hair from her bun. The uniform still branded her invisible, but her eyes had a fire not even gray cotton could hide. Inside, Gerald re-entered the room, his confidence cracked and hollow. Mr. Zhang, he said, voice brittle, I must apologize for these technical challenges. We propose rescheduling for tomorrow morning, with proper translation in place. Ms. Lin's translation was cool. Zhang's reply was colder still. Why waste more time? Perhaps focus on other hotels instead. The associates began closing their portfolios. Gerald's vision blurred. This was the end. And then, from the doorway, a voice rang out. Calm, precise, fluent Mandarin. Respected Mr. Zhang, Naomi said, stepping into the room. I could not help but overhear your questions regarding the recent amendments to foreign investment regulations. Perhaps I may offer some assistance. Every head turned. Confusion, irritation, astonishment. Gerald blinked, as if a ghost had spoken. Not now, he snapped automatically, gesturing for her to leave. This is an important meeting. But Zhang's eyebrows rose for the first time that day. Genuine surprise flickered across his face. He answered her in Mandarin, fast, deliberate, laced with complex business terminology designed to test. Naomi didn't falter. She responded with clarity, citing municipal codes, drawing comparisons to Shanghai and Beijing, explaining the zoning allowances that favored integrated developments. Her Mandarin flowed with academic precision. The air in the room shifted. Associates leaned forward, pens scribbling. Miss Lynn's face betrayed astonishment before she smoothed it back into neutrality. For the first time, Victor Zhang smiled. The conference room had never felt so small. For weeks, Gerald Whitmore had imagined this moment as a grand performance, him at the head of the table, laser pointer in hand, his pitch flowing with effortless authority. Instead, he stood frozen, presentation remote, useless in his palm, while all eyes turned toward the woman in a gray housekeeping uniform who had just shattered his carefully staged scene. Naomi Carter stood by the door, posture straight, hands steady though her heart raced. The silence pressed down, punctuated only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. She had spoken flawless Mandarin. She had done the unthinkable, stepped out of invisibility. Victor Zhang broke the silence first. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with a curiosity that cut sharper than contempt. Then he spoke. Rapid-fire Mandarin, testing, probing, deliberately mixing dialects and business terms that would trip up anyone but the most seasoned professional. Naomi inhaled slowly, then answered without hesitation. She outlined the new tax abatements for properties that incorporated cultural exchange elements. She referenced Shanghai's vertical zoning models and compared them to recent municipal code revisions in the city they now stood in. She cited clauses by number, explaining implications as though she'd spent her morning inside a legal briefing instead of polishing bathroom fixtures. The effect was immediate. The associate's pen scratched faster. One murmured something approving to another. Even Miss Lynn, long composed, faltered for half a breath before recovering her mask. Gerald's mouth went dry. The woman he had ordered removed less than an hour ago now commanded the very stage he had built. His stomach twisted as realization spread among his executives. The maid knew more than all of them combined. He cleared his throat, desperate to reassert control. Thank you, Ms. Carter. That will be sufficient. He turned to Zhang, forcing a smile. If we may return to the scheduled presentation. But Zhang didn't look at him. His gaze stayed fixed on Naomi. He asked another question in Mandarin, this time softer, curious. How does someone with your knowledge come to be wearing that uniform? Naomi's lips curved faintly. She answered in Mandarin, then translated herself into English for the room. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns, but perhaps today that turn can benefit everyone here. Murmurs rippled through the associates. The executives against the wall shifted uneasily. Gerald felt his authority slipping like sand through clenched fists. Ms. Carter, he said tightly, we appreciate your input, but please remember your role. Translate. Don't participate. Naomi turned to him calmly, her eyes level. Mr. Zhang is asking about the Wellington's positioning for Chinese business travelers. If I remain silent, his questions remain unanswered. And unanswered questions are lost opportunities. The words landed like a slap. Zhang chuckled, quiet, genuine. He gestured for her to sit at the table. One of his associates slid a chair out, an unmistakable signal. Naomi crossed the room with measured steps, the sound of her work shoes against the marble crisp in the hush. She lowered herself into the chair as though she belonged there, because she did. Gerald's jaw tightened. Very well, he said, voice strangled. But let's proceed on my terms. Zhang ignored him. He leaned forward, speaking again in Mandarin, this time openly engaging Naomi in dialogue. What adaptations would this hotel need to attract Chinese luxury travelers? What do Western managers often miss? Naomi glanced once at Gerald, then met Zhang's eyes. Her voice was steady as she answered, dedicated tea service, multi-generational accommodations, integration with WeChat Pay and Alipay. She explained why privacy, orientation, and water features mattered to Chinese clients. She translated each point into English for the rest of the room, ensuring no one could pretend ignorance. Gerald felt the ground tilt. His painstaking presentation sat untouched on the screen, while the maid he'd dismissed rewrote the meeting in real time. One associate asked Naomi about regulatory challenges faced by other properties. She responded with a detailed case study from Beijing. Another inquired about competitor hotels. She cited them by name, drawing nuanced comparisons. Zhang's smile widened. "You understand what so many Americans do not," he said in Mandarin. "You listen first." Naomi inclined her head. "It's a skill often overlooked." Gerald's pulse hammered. Each sentence she spoke pulled the deal further into her orbit and further from his control. His promotion, his reputation, everything now hung on a maid who was no longer invisible. He tried one last time. "Mr. Zhang," he said firmly, "while Ms. Carter's insights are intriguing, the Wellington has prepared extensive data and projections. Surely we should—" Zhang lifted a hand. The room obeyed the gesture. "I prefer to continue this conversation with Ms. Carter." The words landed like a gavel. Gerald's breath caught. His dream of steering the meeting was over. Naomi sat straighter. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of her education not as a burden, but as power. Her heart still beat hard, but her voice did not waver. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment to step out of invisibility. Not for Gerald, not even for Zhang, but for herself. And as she continued to speak, guiding the conversation that everyone else had failed to hold, the balance of the room shifted. The billionaire leaned forward, the executives leaned back, and the woman in gray, once ordered out of sight, had become the center of everything. The hum of the projector filled the Wellington's executive conference room, its light casting a forgotten slide onto the wall market graphs and bullet points Gerald Whitmore had slaved over for weeks. Nobody looked at it. Nobody cared. All eyes, all pens, all energy in the room now converged on the woman who had entered as a maid and was sitting as though she had always belonged at that table. Naomi Carter. Her gray uniform was still buttoned neatly to her collar, the name tag reading housekeeping catching the light each time she moved. But the words pouring from her mouth bore no resemblance to the role printed on that badge. She spoke Mandarin with the fluency of someone who had lived and studied in Beijing's lecture halls. Not merely passed through on vacation, she spoke English with the calm clarity of a seasoned consultant. She embodied something the Wellington had lacked all along: credibility. Victor Zhang leaned forward, elbows on the polished mahogany, his expression intent. Every so often, a glimmer of satisfaction flickered across his face when Naomi drew direct comparisons to regulations in Shanghai or strategies from Beijing's hotel districts. His associates scribbled notes feverishly, occasionally glancing at Gerald and his executive team as if to measure their worth against the quiet authority of the maid. Gerald felt his throat constrict. 20 years of ambition, of sacrifice, of clawing up the ladder rung by rung, and now, on the day that should have crowned him, he stood useless, sidelined, watching a housekeeper dismantle and rebuild the meeting he had planned. His palms sweated around the presentation remote. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Zhang," Gerald began, forcing a smile that stretched too thin, "while Ms. Carter's contributions are noted, I believe it would be most efficient if we return to the structured presentation my team has prepared. It contains—" Zhang raised a hand, silencing him without even looking his way. His gaze never left Naomi. In Mandarin, he said, "Tell me, Ms. Carter, how do you believe the Wellington should adapt to meet the expectations of Chinese business travelers?" Naomi inhaled, steadying herself. She could feel Gerald's eyes drilling into her, furious, desperate, but she also felt the weight of the room leaning toward her. Waiting. "Chinese business travelers," she said in Mandarin before translating into English for the executives, "value efficiency, discretion, and cultural familiarity. Many Western hotels underestimate how important it is to provide multi-generational accommodations, grandparents, parents, and children traveling together. The Wellington suites are luxurious but designed primarily for couples or individual executives. Adjusting layouts to accommodate family units would be a significant advantage. She paused, letting the words sink in. Additionally, payment systems. Many of Mr. Zhang's colleagues expect WeChat Pay and Alipay integration. At present, the Wellington does not offer this. It is a small change technologically, but one that signals recognition of cultural norms. Zhang's smile deepened. He tapped a finger on the table, a gesture of approval. His associates nodded, writing faster. Gerald's chest tightened. She's stealing my meeting. She's stealing my deal. One of Zhang's senior advisors, a man with silver hair and glasses, asked Naomi in Mandarin how she would address the challenge of zoning restrictions for mixed-use developments in the city. Without hesitation, Naomi described the municipal code revisions from last quarter, citing exact clauses. She explained how vertical zoning now permitted integration of retail and hospitality in districts previously restricted, a change that favored international investors. Furthermore, she added, glancing toward the skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Wellington's location places it within both the tourism corridor and the international business zone. This dual categorization qualifies the property for overlapping tax incentives. The advisor leaned back, visibly impressed. You have studied this extensively, he said. Naomi's lips curved faintly. It was my graduate thesis. A murmur rippled through Zhang's team. Gerald felt the blood drain from his face. His carefully assembled slide deck had mentioned none of this. He hadn't even known the zoning law had changed. His executives avoided his eyes, each one silently calculating the damage. Zhang leaned closer, eyes fixed on Naomi. Tell me, he said in Mandarin, why are you not in management? Why are you pushing a cleaning cart? The question cracked through the air like thunder. Naomi hesitated only a moment before answering. Life does not always match preparation. After I returned from Beijing, positions were scarce. Bills came quickly. The Wellington was hiring. She met his gaze evenly. But I have never stopped preparing. Zhang studied her, then turned his head toward Gerald for the first time in nearly 20 minutes. Mr. Whitmore, he said through Ms. Lin's translation, why does your hotel employ someone with Ms. Carter's skills in housekeeping rather than in your international relations department? The words landed like a hammer. The executives along the wall stiffened. Emma, head of housekeeping, who had slipped in quietly to watch the meeting, looked down at her shoes, cheeks flushing. Gerald's practiced smile faltered. There has clearly been a misalignment, he said, voice tight. We value all our employees. Ms. Carter's skills are well unexpected. Rest assured, we will review her qualifications immediately. Zhang's expression remained unreadable, but his silence was more damning than words. Naomi pressed on, answering questions from the associates with steady confidence. She outlined how competitor hotels had succeeded or failed to attract Chinese clientele. She spoke of cultural nuances often overlooked, tea service presented with ceremony, feng shui considerations in room orientation, subtle touches of home that transform foreign luxury into familiar comfort. Each word shifted the balance of power further. Where Gerald had once imagined himself dazzling Zhang with graphs and forecasts, it was Naomi, still in her housekeeping uniform, who now commanded respect. Finally, Zhang leaned back, folding his hands. Ms. Carter, he said in Mandarin, in my companies, we implement extensive talent recognition programs. To discover someone like you hidden in housekeeping speaks not of your shortcomings, but of management's blindness. The statement landed like a blade slipped between Gerald's ribs. His knuckles whitened around the remote. The meeting stretched nearly an hour longer, carried almost entirely by Naomi's dialogue with Zhang. When at last the portfolios closed and Zhang rose to his feet, the tension broke not with failure, but with triumph. Your hotel has potential, Zhang said through mid. Lin, I had doubts when I arrived. Now I see possibilities I had not considered. This is because of Mid. Carter. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a sleek black card embossed in gold. He presented it with both hands to Naomi in the traditional Chinese manner. My personal contact. Should you ever wish to explore opportunities beyond the Wellington, I will personally review your application. Naomi accepted the card with equal respect. Thank you, Mr. Zhang. It would be an honor. Gerald stood off to the side, his smile brittle, his stomach churning. He had salvaged the deal, but not through his brilliance. Through hers, and everyone in the room knew it. As Zhang and his associates left for the suite prepared for their stay, the conference room emptied slowly. The executives filed out in silence, glancing at Gerald, glancing at Naomi, each calculating what this meant for the hotel's hierarchy. Emma lingered by the door, her eyes wide. She looked at Naomi as though seeing her for the first time. I had no idea, she whispered. Naomi slipped Zhang's card into her pocket, fingers brushing its sharp edges. No one ever does, she said quietly. Gerald remained at the head of the table, shoulders slumped, tie askew. When the door closed and only the two of them remained, he turned to Naomi. His voice had lost its sharpness, replaced with something weary, almost contrite. It seems, he said slowly, we owe you an apology, and perhaps a conversation about your future here. Naomi studied him, her expression unreadable. For years, she had been invisible to him. For years, her talents had gathered dust while he walked past without a glance. And now, suddenly, he saw her. The question that pressed against her heart was simple. Was it too late? She said nothing. Not yet. That night, as the Wellington's corridors quieted and the chandeliers dimmed, Naomi wheeled her cart back to the housekeeping office one last time. Her hands still smelled faintly of bleach, but inside her pocket burned the weight of the black card, the promise of recognition, the possibility of a future unchained from invisibility. For the first time in years, she felt the balance shift. The world had seen her, and once seen, she could never be unseen again. The elevator chimed as its polished doors slid open onto the executive floor of the Wellington Palace Hotel. 1 month had passed since the meeting with Victor Zhang, but to Naomi Carter it felt as though years had collapsed into weeks. She stepped out with measured confidence, the muted click of her new heels echoing against marble that once knew her by the soft squeak of housekeeping shoes. Her gray uniform was gone. In its place, a tailored charcoal suit fit her frame neatly, a badge pinned to her lapel gleaming in the light. Director of International Guest Relations. As she walked past the front desk, staff who once looked through her now nodded with respect. Some smiled, tentative but genuine. Naomi returned each gesture, remembering what it had felt like to be unseen, to be dismissed. Recognition was more than politeness. It was dignity restored. Inside her office, a former conference room refitted for her new roll bookshelves lined the wall, filled with hospitality management texts, cultural studies, and linguistic reference works. On her desk sat 2 framed items, her master's degree from Beijing University, displayed at last after years in storage, and a letter of intent from Zhang International confirming the Wellington as their newest portfolio property. She touched the edge of the frame lightly, a private acknowledgement. The investment had gone through. Zhang had kept his word. But for Naomi, the true victory lay not in corporate deals or promotions, it lay in what came next. That afternoon, 30 employees gathered in the main conference hall. They wore the uniforms of every department: housekeeping, maintenance, concierge, food service, front desk. Their expressions mixed curiosity with unease. Naomi stood at the front, a presentation behind her on the screen. Across the top read, Hidden Talents Initiative, recognizing the whole person behind every position. Welcome, Naomi began, her voice carrying easily through the room. 1 month ago, I was pushing a housekeeping cart outside this very door. Today, I stand here not because I suddenly gained new skills, but because circumstances finally made my abilities visible. A ripple of recognition moved through the group. Some nodded slowly, others lowered their eyes. Naomi pressed forward. We recently surveyed all staff. 40% of you speak a language other than English. 65% hold degrees or certifications unrelated to your current jobs. 78% have specialized skills you never use at work. Gasps and murmurs spread. People exchanged glances, surprised to learn they were not alone. This initiative exists because hidden talent is wasted talent. The Wellington can only reach its full potential when every one of you is seen, not just as uniforms, but as whole people. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then swelling. At the back of the room, Gerald stood quietly, arms crossed. He looked older than he had a month ago, as though the weight of recognition, both of his failure and of Naomi's brilliance, had etched itself into his features. But he nodded, and Naomi caught the gesture. It was small, but it was sincere. The following weeks unfolded with quiet revolution. A young bellhop revealed fluency in Korean and began assisting with delegations from Seoul. A dishwasher who held a degree in architecture contributed to the redesign of the lobby space, improving flow and accessibility. A night shift security guard, once dismissed as surly, turned out to be a certified IT technician who helped upgrade the hotel's network. Naomi oversaw each placement personally. She met with staff one by one, listening to their stories, their frustrations, their hopes. For many, it was the first time anyone at the Wellington had asked who they were beyond the tasks they performed. By the end of the month, 3 employees had been promoted. 5 received additional pay for language use, and all 30 walked with straighter backs, aware their skills mattered. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the skyline, Naomi stood once more in the grand lobby. She watched a delegation of Chinese business travelers check in, their conversations flowing easily as front desk staff greeted them in Mandarin and Cantonese. A tea service, newly installed under her guidance, awaited them in a side lounge. A QR code for WeChat Pay gleamed discreetly at the reception counter. The guests smiled, genuinely impressed. The Wellington had changed. Across the lobby, a young man in a maintenance uniform adjusted a light fixture with practiced hands. Naomi recognized him, an engineering student she had spoken to during the initiative's first session. Their eyes met briefly. He smiled shyly, then returned to his work. She smiled back, remembering what it felt like to live unseen, waiting for the right moment. Later that night, as the lobby emptied and chandeliers dimmed, Naomi lingered by the staircase. She thought of her journey years of invisibility, of rejection letters, of swallowing her pride. She thought of the single moment she chose to step into the light, knowing she could be punished for overstepping. That decision had changed everything. She reached into her purse, pulling out Zhang's black business card. The gold embossing glimmered faintly in the soft light. She had not called the number, not yet. She was not ready to leave the Wellington. For now, her place was here, ensuring no one else remained invisible. Naomi slipped the card back into her wallet and looked out across the lobby. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but firm, meant as much for herself as for anyone who might someday hear her story. The true value of a person, she whispered, is never erased by being overlooked. It waits, like a stone unpolished, until the right eyes see its brilliance. Dear listener, maybe in your workplace, in your community, even in your own home, someone right now is invisible, someone whose talents, skills, or wisdom remain hidden behind a uniform, a title, or a role too small for who they truly are. What would happen if you saw them? What would change if you gave them the chance to step forward? If this story has moved you, don't keep it hidden. Share it. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that reveal the extraordinary within the ordinary, because silence protects the system, but courage rewrites it. This is Beat Stories, where every untold story finds its voice.